I'm Luann Browne, 32, and after 3 years of marriage and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, I was finally celebrating the miracle growing inside me. Our gender reveal party was supposed to be perfect pink balloons, my husband Marcus beaming. With pride, our families gathered in joy. Then she walked in, Rachel, Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college, standing in my backyard with a rounded belly, tears streaming down her face as she announced to everyone that she was also pregnant with my husband's baby. The silence was deafening. My world shattered in that moment, but what I discovered in the weeks that followed would expose a web of lies so deep. It would change everything, not just about my marriage, but about the man I thought I knew. If you've ever felt your perfect life crumble in an instant, you'll understand what came next. Let me take you back to how it all began. Marcus and I met at a coffee shop near downtown 5 years ago. I was working as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit, and he was this charming financial advisor who made me laugh until my sides hurt. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the room, like every word I said mattered deeply to him. Our wedding photos still sat on the mantle that morning, both of us grinning like teenagers who just discovered love. In that picture, I'm wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, and Marcus has his arm wrapped protectively around my waist. We look so happy, so certain about our future together. Looking at it now, I wonder if he was already thinking about other women even then. The fertility struggles started almost immediately after our honeymoon. Month after month of negative pregnancy tests, doctor visits, and well-meaning relatives asking when we'd start a family. The first miscarriage happened at 8 weeks, just when we'd started to believe it was really happening. The second one came a year later at 10 weeks this time. I remember lying in that hospital bed, Marcus holding my hand while I sobbed, promising me we'd get through this together. "We'll have our baby, Luann," he had whispered, kissing my forehead. "I promise you we'll have our family." For months after that second loss, I couldn't even look at baby clothes or walk past the nursery we'd started to set up. Marcus was patient with my grief, or at least he seemed to be. He'd bring me tea in bed, rub my back when I cried, and never complained when I wasn't ready to try again right away. When I finally got pregnant this time, we were cautiously optimistic. Every doctor's appointment brought relief, heartbeat strong, growth normal, no signs of the complications that had claimed our previous pregnancies. By the time we reached the halfway mark, Marcus was already talking about converting the spare room into a nursery and debating baby names over dinner. What about Emma if it's a girl? He'd suggested just last week, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Emma Rose Brown. "It has a nice ring to it." I'd smiled and placed his hand on my growing belly. "She's going to be Daddy's little girl, isn't she?" The gender reveal party was my idea. After everything we'd been through, I wanted to celebrate this pregnancy, to share our joy with everyone who'd supported us through the dark times. My sister helped me plan it pink and blue decorations, a cake with colored filling inside, and that beautiful pink balloon that would announce our daughter's arrival. Marcus seemed genuinely excited that morning, helping me arrange the food tables and greeting guests with proud smiles. His parents were there, along with my family, our closest friends from church, and several couples from our neighborhood. Everyone was so happy for us, knowing what we'd endured to get to this moment. "You're glowing," my mother had said, pulling me aside as guests began arriving. "This is your time, sweetheart. Enjoy every moment." I had been glowing. For the first time in years, I felt completely happy, completely secure in my life and my marriage. The sun was shining, our backyard looked like something from a magazine, and I was surrounded by people who loved us. Marcus's best friend, Jake, was setting up the balloon release when I noticed. Marcus checking his phone more frequently than usual. He kept stepping away from conversations to text someone, his expression growing more tense with each message. "Everything okay?" I'd asked, touching his arm as he typed furiously. Just work stuff, he'd replied, sliding the phone into his pocket with a forced smile. Nothing that can't wait. I should have known then that something was wrong. Marcus was never distracted during important moments, and he promised me this day would be about us, about our family. But I was too caught up in the joy of the moment to question it further. When everyone gathered around for the balloon release, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. These people had watched us struggle, had prayed for us, had celebrated small victories and mourned our losses. Having them there to share in announcing our daughter felt like the perfect, full circle moment. Marcus stood beside me as we prepared to release the balloon, his hand warm on my lower back. "Ready, Mama?" He'd asked, and I'd nodded, tears of happiness already forming in my eyes. That's when I saw her walking through our back gate. Rachel looked exactly as I remembered her from the few college photos I'd seen, tall, willowy, with that effortless beauty that made other women feel invisible. But now she was pregnant, obviously so, probably about as far along as I was. She wore a simple sundress that hugged her belly, and her face was streaked with tears. The conversations around us gradually died as people noticed her walking across our yard. I felt Marcus go rigid beside me, his hand dropping from my back, as if I'd suddenly become untouchable. "Marcus?" I whispered, but he was already moving toward her, his face pale with something I'd never seen before, pure panic. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" His voice was low, urgent, like he was trying to keep the rest of us from hearing. But in the sudden silence of our backyard, every word carried. She stopped about 10 feet away from our gathered family and friends, her hand protectively cradling her belly. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus. I can't keep pretending." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Pretending what?" I managed to ask, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Rachel's eyes met mine, and I saw genuine anguish there. "I'm so sorry, Luann. I never wanted it to happen like this. But I'm pregnant too, and the baby." She took a shuddering breath. "The baby is Marcus's." The pink balloon slipped from my hands and drifted toward the sky. Our daughter's announcement floating away like a forgotten dream. Around us, I could hear my mother gasp, someone's chair scraping against the patio stones, the sound of my sister's voice saying, "Oh my God," in a whisper. "That's impossible," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Rachel, you're confused. You're upset about something else." She reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like an ultrasound photo. "I'm 18 weeks pregnant, Marcus. The timing matches perfectly with that weekend you told Luann you were at the conference in Chicago." Chicago. I remembered that conference. Marcus had been gone for 4 days, and I'd been disappointed because it was right around the time we'd been trying to conceive. He'd called me every night, told me he missed me, even brought me back a little snow globe from the hotel gift shop. "This is insane," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded strange and distant. "Marcus, tell her she's wrong." Tell everyone she's wrong. But Marcus wasn't denying it anymore. He was staring at the ultrasound photo in Rachel's outstretched hand like it was a death sentence. The silence stretched on until my father cleared his throat. "I think maybe we should give you folks some privacy," Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. "Come on, everyone, let's head inside." "No," I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "If she has something to say, she can say it in front of everyone. These people have been part of our journey from the beginning." Rachel looked around at all the faces watching her, then back at me. "I never wanted to hurt you, Luann. When Marcus told me you were having fertility problems, I felt so terrible for you. But he said your marriage was over, that you were just staying together out of obligation." "He said what?" The words came out as a whisper. "He said you'd grown apart, that you both knew it was ending, but were too scared to admit it. He said once you accepted that you couldn't have children, You'd both be free to find happiness with other people. I felt like I was drowning in broad daylight. Every word she spoke felt like a physical blow, and I could barely process what I was hearing. When did he tell you this? We've been seeing each other for 8 months, Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. I know how this looks, but I thought I was helping both of you by giving him someone to turn to during a difficult time. 8 months. I was trying to do the math in my head, trying to remember what was happening 8 months ago. That's when I'd started going to therapy to deal with the grief from our second miscarriage. Marcus had been so supportive, driving me to appointments, encouraging me to take all the time I needed to heal. The conference in Chicago, I said, the pieces finally starting to click together. You were with him? Rachel nodded miserably. And in Atlanta 2 months ago, and last month when he said he was visiting his college friend in Denver. Each revelation hit me like a physical blow. The Denver trip, I'd been so proud of him for maintaining his friendships, for taking time to nurture relationships outside our marriage. I'd packed his bag myself, kissed him goodbye at the airport, and counted down the days until he came home. Marcus, I said, turning to face my husband, say something, please. He looked like a man drowning, his eyes darting between Rachel and me and all the faces of our family and friends. Luann, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted. Can you explain how you've been living a double life for 8 months? Can you explain how you let me believe I was the problem? That my body was failing us while you were creating a family with someone else? The fight seemed to go out of him then. His shoulders sagged and he looked down at his hands. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I asked, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. Inside, I was screaming, but my voice was steady and clear. I don't know, he admitted. I was confused and hurt, and I didn't know how to handle everything we were going through. So you handled it by lying to both of us, I said, by making me think there was something wrong with me while you were out there proving there wasn't. Rachel stepped forward then, her voice breaking. Luann, I'm so sorry. If I had known if I had any idea that you were pregnant too, I would never have believed him. I would never have let this happen. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw my own pain reflected in her eyes. We'd both been betrayed by the same man, both manipulated into believing we were helping him through a difficult time. How far along are you? I asked her. 18 weeks, she said quietly. I'm having a boy. Marcus was having a son with her while having a daughter with me. The irony was almost too much to bear. I think you should go, I said to Rachel, though my voice held no anger toward her. This isn't your fault, but I need to figure out what happens next. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, Luann. I'm so sorry. As she walked away, I turned back to Marcus, who was still standing there like a statue, staring at the ground. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Luann, please, get out of my house, Marcus, now. That night, I sat in our bedroom staring at Marcus's phone, which he'd left on the nightstand in his rush to pack a bag and leave. He'd begged me to let him explain, but I couldn't bear to hear another word. My sister had stayed to help clean up the party decorations while my mother put away the untouched food. Both of them moving around me like I was made of glass. The phone buzzed every few minutes with text messages, and each notification felt like a needle in my chest. I knew I shouldn't look, knew it would only make everything worse, but I couldn't stop myself. The truth was sitting right there in front of me. The first few messages were from Rachel. I'm sorry I had to do that to you both, but I couldn't keep lying. Call me when you can. We need to talk about what happens next. I hope Luann is okay. I never wanted to hurt her. Then there were messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Saw the drama on Facebook. Are you okay, man? Dude, your wife posted about the party being canceled. What happened? Someone had posted about it on social. Media. I felt sick thinking about our private pain being discussed by acquaintances and strangers. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives, and now it was becoming the subject of gossip and speculation. I scrolled through Marcus's recent conversations, and my heart broke a little more with each revelation. There were weeks of messages between him and Rachel talking about their relationship, their future, their baby. Mixed in between were messages to me, sweet, loving texts about how excited he was for our daughter, how much he loved me, how blessed he felt to have me as his wife. Reading them side by side was like looking at two completely different men. The Marcus who texted Rachel was passionate, spontaneous, full of plans for their future together. The Marcus who texted me was dutiful, careful, saying all the right things, but somehow lacking the genuine emotion that came through in his messages to her. There was one conversation that made me physically ill. It was from 3 weeks ago, right after my doctor's appointment where we'd confirmed we were having a girl. Marcus to Rachel, she's so happy about the baby. I don't know how to tell her about us. Rachel to Marcus, you promised you'd talk to her after the reveal party. We can't keep doing this. Marcus to Rachel, I know, I just need more time. She's been through so much. Rachel to Marcus, what about what I've been through? I'm having your baby too, Marcus. Our son deserves to have his father, our son. They'd been planning a future together while I was planning nursery themes and baby names. I'd been worried about cribs and car seats while they were worried about how to destroy my marriage. The bedroom door opened quietly, and my sister Emma peeked in. Hey, how are you holding up? I found his phone, I said, holding it up like evidence. They've been planning this for months, Em. While I was going to therapy to deal with our losses, he was building a whole other life. Emma sat down on the bed beside me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. I'm so sorry, Luann. I can't believe he did this to you. The worst part is that I feel like such a fool, I said, leaning into her embrace. All those nights he came home late from work dinners, all those weekends he had to catch up on paperwork. I believed every single lie because I trusted him completely. That doesn't make you a fool, Emma said firmly. That makes you a loving wife who had faith in her husband. He's the one who betrayed that trust. I pulled up another conversation, this one from a month ago. Marcus had been texting someone named Jake, not his best friend Jake, but someone else entirely. Marcus to Jake, I'm in too deep, man. I don't know how to get out of this. Jake too? Marcus, you should have thought about that before you started lying to both of them. Marcus to Jake, Rachel thinks I'm leaving my wife after the baby comes. Luann thinks we're building our dream family. I'm screwed either way. Jake to Marcus, you need to pick one and stick with it. This is going to blow up in your face. He knew, I whispered, showing Emma the messages. He knew this was going to destroy me, and he kept doing it anyway. Emma read over the conversation, her face growing more angry with each message. Who is this Jake person? Do you know him? I have no idea, I said. Apparently, Marcus has a whole secret life I knew nothing about. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was Marcus himself calling. I stared at his contact photo, a picture I'd taken of him laughing at something I'd said during our anniversary dinner last year. He looked so happy, so genuine. Had he been thinking about Rachel even then? Are you going to answer it? Emma asked. I don't know what to say to him, I admitted. Part of me wants to scream at him, and part of me wants to hear him beg for forgiveness. But mostly, I just want to understand how the man I married could do this to me. The ringing stopped and a voicemail notification appeared. I hesitated for a moment, then played it. Luann, please. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I can explain everything. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you. Don't let one bad decision destroy what we have. One bad decision. As if 8 months. of lies and betrayal was a single moment of poor judgment. He still doesn't get it, I said to Emma. He thinks this is something he can explain away. Maybe talking to him would help, Emma suggested gently. Not to forgive him, but to get the answers you need. I looked down at my growing belly, at the place where our daughter was growing. In a few months, she'd be here, and I'd have to make decisions about custody and co-parenting and how to protect her from the chaos her father had created. I need to know everything, I said finally. Every lie, every trip, every moment he chose her over me. I can't move forward without understanding what my marriage really was. Emma nodded. But you don't have to do this alone. I'm here, Mom, and Dad are here, and we're going to help you get through this. I placed my hand on my belly and felt our daughter kick, as if she was responding to the sound of my voice. I'm going to protect you, baby girl, I whispered. I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing that love should never come with lies. The phone buzzed again with another message from Marcus. I'm staying at Jake's tonight. Please don't change the locks. We need to figure this out together. But there was no together anymore. There was only the truth and the long road ahead of learning to live with it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't expected. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a determination to understand the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. I needed facts, not emotions, to make the decisions ahead of me. Emma had spent the night on the couch, and I found her in the kitchen making coffee with the careful movements of someone trying not to wake a sleeping bear. How did you sleep? She asked, though we both knew the answer. I didn't, I said, settling into a chair at the breakfast table. But I've been thinking. I need to know everything, Em. Every lie, every secret, every dollar he spent on his other life. She poured me a cup of decaf and sat across from me. What do you want to start with? Money, I said. If he's been living a double life for 8 months, it had to cost something. Hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts for Rachel, that all comes from somewhere. We spread out our bank statements on the kitchen table, and I started going through them line by line. At first, everything looked normal: mortgage payments, grocery stores, gas stations, the usual expenses of married life. But as I looked more closely, patterns began to emerge. Here, I said, pointing to a charge from 3 months ago. Morton's Steakhouse, $180. I remember this night because he said he was taking a client to dinner. But I had morning sickness and asked him to bring me something home. He said they'd already eaten by the time he thought of it. Emma leaned over to look. That's expensive for a client dinner. And here, I continued, my finger trailing down the page. Jewelry store, $450. He told me he was buying a gift for his mother's birthday, but her birthday isn't until December. The more I looked, the more lies I found. Weekend trips that were supposedly work-related, but had charges for romantic restaurants and expensive wine. A charge for lingerie from a boutique downtown lingerie I'd never seen. Hotel rooms in our own city, which made no sense unless he was meeting someone he couldn't bring home. Oh my God, I whispered, staring at a particular entry. He spent $1,200 at a baby store last month. The same week we were shopping for our nursery, Emma's face went pale. He was buying things for Rachel's baby. The betrayal hit me in waves. While I was carefully budgeting for cribs and car seats, comparing prices and reading reviews, Marcus was secretly outfitting another nursery for another woman. The financial deception was almost as painful as the emotional one. I called our bank and asked for detailed statements going back a year. When they arrived by email an hour later, the full scope of Marcus's lies became clear. He'd been using our joint credit card to fund his relationship with Rachel, and he'd been doing it so gradually that I'd never noticed the increase in our monthly expenses. Look at this, I said, showing Emma a pattern I'd discovered. Every time he told me he was working late, there's a charge at a restaurant or bar near Rachel's apartment. Every business trip has hotel charges that don't match the cities he said he was visiting. But the most devastating discovery was a series of charges I'd completely missed. Marcus had been regularly transferring money from our joint savings account into a checking account I didn't know existed. Over the course of 8 months, he'd moved nearly $15,000 of our money we'd been saving for the baby, for a down payment on a bigger house for our future. He stole from us, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. He literally stole our savings to fund his affair. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing what we'd found. Luann, this isn't just cheating. This is financial fraud. He's been using your money to support another woman and her pregnancy. The phone rang, and I saw Marcus's name on the caller ID. This time, I answered. Luann, thank God, he said, his voice heavy with relief. I've been trying to reach you all night. I've been busy, I said, my voice steady and cold. Learning about your secret bank account, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. How much of our money did you give her, Marcus? I continued. How much of our daughter's future did you spend on your son? It's not what you think, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I can explain. I found the jewelry store charge. I interrupted. I found the baby store purchases. I found the hotel rooms in our own city. What exactly do you think needs explaining? I was going to tell you, he said weakly. After the party, I was going to sit you down and explain everything. You were going to tell me that you've been stealing from our savings account to support your pregnant mistress. You were going to tell me that you've spent the last 8 months lying to me about where you were, who you were with, and what you were doing. I never meant for it to go this far, he said, and I could hear him crying. I love you, Luann. I've always loved you. No, I said, and I was surprised by how strong my voice sounded. You don't get to say that. You don't get to claim you love me while you're building a life with someone else. You don't get to say you love me while you're stealing from our family. What do you want me to do? He asked. Tell me what to do to fix this. I looked at Emma, who was watching me with a mixture of pride and concern. I want you to stay away from me, I said. I want you to get your things from the house when I'm not here. And I want you to start thinking about how you're going to explain to our daughter why her father chose to destroy her family before she was even born. Luann, please. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment, processing what I'd just done. For the first time since Rachel had walked into our backyard, I felt like I was taking control of my own life. I'm proud of you, Emma said softly. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But I'm tired of being the victim in this story. I'm tired of being the woman who gets lied to and manipulated while everyone else makes decisions about my life. I looked down at our financial records, at the evidence of months of betrayal and deception. I need to call a lawyer, I said, and I need to protect what's left of our money before he spends it all on his other family. Emma nodded. I'll help you research divorce attorneys, and Luann, you're going to get through this. You're stronger than you know. I placed my hand on my belly and felt our daughter moving inside me. I'm going to make sure she never accepts being treated like this, I said. I'm going to teach her that love should never come with lies, and that she deserves better than a man who can't choose her above all others. The financial evidence was just the beginning. If Marcus had been lying about money, what else had he been lying about? I was going to find out, and I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of every single deception. 2 days later, I made the hardest phone call of my life. Rachel answered on the second ring, her voice cautious and strained. Luann, is everything okay? I need to talk to you, I said. Not to fight, not to blame you, but to understand what really happened. Can we meet somewhere? There was a long pause. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm sure, I said. I need to hear your side of the story. I need to know what he told you about me, about our marriage, about everything. We agreed to meet at a small cafe across town, somewhere neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. I arrived first and chose a corner table. my hands shaking as I ordered a decaf coffee. When Rachel walked in, I was struck again by how beautiful she was, how young she looked despite being only a few years younger than me. She sat down across from me, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. I want you to know that I never would have gotten involved with him if I'd known the truth about your marriage. What truth did he tell you? I asked, Rachel's eyes filled with tears. He said you'd been drifting apart for years. He said that fertility problems had put too much strain on your relationship and that you both realized you wanted different things. He made it sound like you were staying together out of habit, not love. Each word felt like a physical blow. When did you first meet him? Last September, she said. I was working at a coffee shop near his office and he started coming in regularly. He was so charming, so attentive. He'd ask about my day, remember little things I'd mentioned. I was going through a rough breakup and he was this stable, mature man who seemed to really care about me, double quotes, September. That was right after my second miscarriage, when I was in the depths of grief and Marcus was supposedly being my rock, supporting me through the darkest period of my life. He told me he was separated, Rachel continued, living in the same house for financial reasons, but sleeping in different rooms. He said you both knew it was over, but were too scared to make it official. We were never separated, I said quietly. We were sharing a bed, planning our future, trying to conceive this baby. The night before he met you, he held me while I cried about losing our second pregnancy. Rachel's face crumpled. I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Tell me about the relationship, I said. I need to understand what my marriage really was. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small bundle of papers. I brought these for you, she said, sliding them across the table. They're letters he wrote me over the past few months. I thought you should see them. I unfolded the first letter, and Marcus's handwriting filled the page. The words were passionate, romantic, full of promises about their future together. He wrote about how much he loved her, how she brought meaning back to his life, how he couldn't wait to build a family with her. He told me he was waiting for the right time to tell you about us, Rachel said. He said he wanted to make sure you were emotionally ready to hear that your marriage was over. I read through several more letters, each one more devastating than the last. In one, Marcus wrote about how guilty he felt lying to me, but how he knew I'd be happier once I was free to find someone who could give me the family I deserved. In another, he described their weekend getaways, the same trips he told me were work conferences. The Chicago trip, I said, looking up from the letters. He brought me back a snow globe. He bought me a necklace, Rachel said softly. We spent the whole weekend planning our future, talking about baby names, imagining what our life would be like. The parallel gifts felt like the cruelest detail of all. While I was treasuring a cheap souvenir as proof of his love, he was giving her jewelry and promises of forever. When did you find out I was pregnant? I asked. 3 months ago, Rachel said. I was 12 weeks along, and he was so happy about our baby. Then he came to see me that night looking devastated. He said you just told him you were pregnant, too, and he didn't know what to do. What did he say about me? Rachel hesitated, then continued. He said you'd be a wonderful mother, but that he couldn't pretend to be happy about a pregnancy that would trap him in a loveless marriage. He said he was going to try to be supportive until after the baby was born, then he'd tell you the truth. I felt sick. While I was glowing with joy about our miracle pregnancy, Marcus was seeing it as a trap, an obstacle to his happiness with Rachel. He was going to leave me after the baby was born. I asked. That was the plan, Rachel said. He said once you had the baby, you'd have what you always wanted, and it would be easier for you to accept that your marriage was over. I stared at the letters in my hands, at the physical evidence of how thoroughly my husband had betrayed me. He was going to let me go through pregnancy and childbirth, believing we were a happy family, then abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. I'm so sorry, Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was helping both of you find happiness. I thought I was being patient and understanding by waiting for him to end things properly. You were being manipulated, I said, and I meant it, just like I was. We sat in silence for a moment, two women who had been lied to by the same man, both carrying his children, both trying to make sense of the wreckage. What happens now? Rachel asked. I don't know, I admitted. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure he faces consequences for what he's done. But I want you to know that I don't blame you. You were told lies, just like I was. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for saying that. I've been so afraid that you'd hate me. I hate what happened, I said. But you're not the villain here. We both trusted the wrong man. As we parted ways, Rachel hugged me gently. I hope you find happiness, Luann. You deserve so much better than what he gave you. Driving home, I felt strangely lighter despite the painful revelations. Finally, I understood the full scope of Marcus's betrayal. He hadn't just cheated on me, he'd systematically deceived two women, made promises to both of us, and planned to abandon me at my most vulnerable moment. The love letter sat on my passenger seat, proof that my husband had been capable of deep, passionate love, just not with me. While he was writing romantic letters to Rachel, he was giving me dutiful hugs and perfunctory kisses, going through the motions of being a husband while his heart was elsewhere. But now I knew the truth. And knowledge, as painful as it was, gave me power. Armed with Rachel's revelations, I decided to investigate the business trips Marcus had claimed were work-related. The patterns in our bank statements had shown charges in cities that didn't match his supposed conference locations, and I needed to understand the full extent of his deception. I started with his most recent work trip to Denver. Marcus had shown me a fake itinerary, complete with conference schedule and hotel information. He'd been so convincing, even discussing the seminars he planned to attend, the networking opportunities he was excited about. When I called the hotel listed on his fake itinerary, they had no record of him ever staying there. The conference he'd claimed to attend didn't exist, but our credit card showed charges at a romantic bed and breakfast in Aspen, along with expensive dinners and activities for two. Emma helped me create a timeline, matching his lies to the credit card charges. This is unbelievable, she said, looking at the evidence we'd compiled. He created fake business documents to cover his tracks. It gets worse, I said, pulling up his email on the computer we shared. Look at this. I found a folder labeled work conferences that contained dozens of fake itineraries, confirmation emails, and travel documents. Marcus had been creating elaborate fiction to cover his affairs, complete with fake conference websites and made-up business contacts. He spent hours on this, Emma said, scrolling through the fake documents. This isn't just cheating, this is sociopathic behavior. But the most shocking discovery was a lease agreement I found buried in his email. Marcus had been renting a small apartment across town for the past 6 months, a place where he could meet Rachel without the complications of hotels. He has a secret apartment, I said, showing Emma the lease. He's been living a completely separate life. The apartment was in a trendy part of town, the kind of place young professionals lived when they wanted to feel sophisticated and independent. The lease was in his name only, paid for with money transferred from our joint account. We need to go there, Emma said. We need to see what he's been hiding. I wasn't sure I was ready for what we might find, but I needed to see the physical space where my husband had been building his other life. We drove to the address on the lease, a modern building with a doorman and underground parking. Unit 412, I said, reading from the lease agreement. He has a key code. The apartment was small but beautifully decorated, with furniture I'd never seen before and artwork that reflected none of the tastes Marcus and I shared. There were photos of him and Rachel on the kitchen counter, vacation pictures from trips I'd never known about, moments of happiness that existed parallel to our marriage dot in the bedroom. I found a closet full of clothes, nice shirts, expensive suits, casual wear that he'd never brought home. It was like discovering that my husband had been leading a double life so complete that he'd needed an entire separate wardrobe. "Look at this," Emma said, holding up a jewelry box. Inside were cufflinks I'd never seen, a watch I didn't recognize, and a ring that definitely wasn't his wedding band. The kitchen drawers contained takeout menus from restaurants Rachel had mentioned, wine openers, and couples cooking utensils. The bathroom had 2 sets of toiletries, his and hers towels, and a medicine cabinet stocked with prenatal vitamins. "He was playing house with her," I said, sitting down on the couch that was supposed to be our future nursery furniture budget. "While I was at home planning our daughter's room, he was here planning a life with Rachel." But the most devastating discovery was in the bedroom knitstand. I found a notebook where Marcus had been writing down his thoughts, working through his feelings about his double life. The entries were dated, creating a timeline of his emotional journey over the past several months. March 15th, Luann is finally starting to heal from the last miscarriage. I should be happy for her, but all I can think about is Rachel. I'm in love with 2 women, and I don't know how to choose. April 2nd, Rachel thinks I'm going to leave Luann after the baby is born. She's planning our future together, and I can't bring myself to tell her I'm not sure I can go through with it. May 10th, Luann is glowing with pregnancy. She's so happy, so trusting. I'm a monster for what I'm doing to her. June 1st, I told Rachel I need more time. She's getting impatient, and I don't blame her. But how do I destroy one life to build another? Each entry revealed the depth of his deception and the calculation behind his choices. He'd been weighing his options, considering his future, treating both Rachel and me like variables in an equation he was trying to solve. He was never going to choose, I said, closing the notebook. He was going to keep both of us hanging on until one of us forced the issue. Emma was quiet, absorbing the full scope of what we'd discovered. "This is evidence. Luann, this proves premeditation, systematic deception, financial fraud. Your lawyer needs to see all of this." I looked around the apartment one more time, at the life Marcus had built in secret, at the future he'd been planning without me. The fake business trips, the secret apartment, the elaborate lies. It was all proof that my marriage had been a sham for months. "He made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something," I said. Every time I questioned why he was working so much, why he seemed distracted, why he was always checking his phone, he made me feel like a paranoid wife who didn't trust her husband. "That's called gaslighting," Emma said. "And it's emotional abuse." As we prepared to leave, I took photos of everything, the fake documents, the apartment, the evidence of his double life. I needed documentation of every lie, every deception, every moment he'd chosen to build a future with Rachel while pretending to build one with me. Walking out of that apartment, I felt like I was finally seeing my husband clearly. For the first time, he wasn't the man I'd married, the man I thought I knew. He was a stranger who'd been pretending to be my husband. While living an entirely separate life, the Marcus I'd loved had never really existed. He'd been a carefully constructed fiction, just like his fake business trips and forged conference itineraries. And now that I knew the truth, I could finally start building a real-life one based on honesty instead of lies. The hardest part of discovering the truth about Marcus was realizing that his family had known. When I confronted his mother, Patricia, 3 days after finding the apartment, her reaction told me everything I needed to know. "Luann, sweetheart," she said, opening her front door with a forced smile. "I've been meaning to call you. How are you feeling?" "I found Marcus's apartment," I said without preamble. "I know about Rachel, about the fake business trips, about everything." Patricia's face went pale, and she stepped back to let me in. Oh, honey, I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. You knew? I asked, though her expression had already given me the answer. She led me to her living room, the same space where Marcus and I had shared countless family dinners and holiday celebrations. I suspected something was wrong, she said carefully. Marcus has been troubled lately. Troubled? I repeated. He's been living a double life, Patricia. He's been stealing money from our joint account to support his pregnant mistress. She flinched at my directness. I know you're hurt. I'm not hurt, I interrupted. I'm devastated. And I'm angry that his family knew what he was doing and didn't warn me. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to her bookshelf and pulled out a small leather journal. I found this in Marcus's old room when I was cleaning out his closet last month, she said, handing it to me. I think you should. Read it. The journal was from Marcus's teenage years, but as I flipped through it, I found entries that made my blood run cold. Page after page detailed his relationships with multiple girls, his strategies for keeping them from finding out about each other, his pride in being able to maintain several romantic relationships simultaneously. He was 17 when he wrote this, Patricia said quietly, but the pattern was already there. I read an entry from his senior year of high school, told Sarah I was studying with Mike, told Jessica I was at work, and spent the afternoon with Amanda. They have no idea about each other. I'm getting good at this. This is who he's always been, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. This isn't about the stress of our fertility problems or a moment of weakness. This is his pattern. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I kept hoping he'd grown out of it when he married you, when you were so happy together. I thought maybe he'd finally learn to be faithful. Did his father know? I asked. Robert suspected, she admitted. He saw Marcus with another woman at a restaurant downtown about 6 months ago. We argued about whether to tell you, and you decided not to. We thought it might be nothing, she said weakly. We didn't want to destroy your marriage over a suspicion. I felt betrayed all over again. Marcus's parents had seen evidence of his cheating and chosen to protect him instead of me. They'd watched me struggle with fertility problems, watched me grieve our lost pregnancies, watched me plan a future with their son, all while knowing he was betraying me. I'm pregnant with your grandchild, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I'm carrying your son's baby, and you let me believe I was building a life with a faithful husband. We didn't know about the other woman's pregnancy, Patricia said. We didn't know how serious it was. It doesn't matter how serious it was, I said. What matters is that you had information that could have saved me from this humiliation, and you chose to keep it to yourself. I stood up to leave, but Patricia grabbed my arm. Luann, please, you're still family. That baby you're carrying is my grandchild. No, I said, pulling away from her. I'm not family anymore. Family protects each other. Family tells the truth. You're strangers who chose to protect a liar over an innocent woman. What do you want us to do? She asked desperately. I want you to tell me everything, I said. Every suspicion, every time you questioned his behavior, every moment you thought about warning me. I want the complete truth. Patricia sat back down, looking older than I'd ever seen her. There were other women before Rachel, she said quietly. During your first year of marriage, I caught him on the phone with someone, talking in a way that wasn't appropriate for a married man. You caught him cheating during our first year, and you never told me? I confronted him about it, she said. He swore it was just a friend, that he was helping her through a difficult time. He begged me not to say anything to you. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him, she said. He's my son, Luann. I wanted to believe he was capable of being the husband you deserved. I felt sick. Marcus had been cheating on me from the beginning of our marriage, and his family had been covering for him. Every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every moment they'd watched me struggle with fertility problems, they'd known I was being betrayed. The fertility problems, I said suddenly. Did you ever wonder if Marcus was the reason we couldn't get pregnant? If his stress from leading a double life was affecting our ability to conceive? Patricia looked stricken. I never thought of that. Well, I am now, I said. I'm thinking about how he made me feel like my body was failing us when he was the one destroying our marriage from the inside. I walked toward the door, then turned back. I want you to know that you'll have limited access to my daughter. You chose to protect Marcus over me, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character. Luann, please. I'm done with this family's lies, I said. I'm done with people who think loyalty means covering up betrayal. My daughter deserves better than relatives who prioritize keeping secrets over protecting innocent people. Driving home, I felt a mixture of rage and relief. The rage was obvious. I'd been betrayed not just by my husband, but by his entire family. But the relief was unexpected. Finally, I understood that Marcus's behavior wasn't about me, wasn't about our fertility struggles, wasn't about anything I'd done wrong. This was who he was, who he'd always been. The teenage diary entries had shown me that Marcus was a serial cheater, someone who got a thrill from juggling multiple relationships and deceiving everyone involved. I hadn't failed as a wife, I'd simply married a man who was incapable of fidelity. When I got home, I called Emma and told her about the diary, about Patricia's admissions, about the family's conspiracy of silence. They're all complicit, Emma sighed, her voice furious. They watched you suffer through miscarriages and fertility treatments while protecting the man who was betraying you. The worst part is that they made me feel like I was being paranoid, I said. Every time I questioned Marcus's behavior, his mother would tell me how lucky I was to have such a devoted husband. At psychological manipulation, Emma said. They were gaslighting you on his behalf. I looked at Marcus's teenage diary again, at the evidence of his lifelong pattern of deception. I need to show this to my lawyer, I said. This proves that his behavior with Rachel isn't a one-time mistake. This is who he is. Are you going to confront him with it? I thought about that for a moment. No, I said finally. I'm done confronting Marcus. I'm done trying to understand his motivations or get him to admit the truth. I know who he is now, and that's enough. That night, I sat in what was supposed to be our daughter's nursery, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal. The fake business documents, the bank statements, the love letters to Rachel, the teenage diary, it was all proof that my marriage had been built on lies from the very beginning. But as I sat there, I realized something important. I wasn't the same woman who'd been devastated by Rachel's announcement at the gender reveal party. I was stronger now, more determined, more focused on protecting my daughter and building a life based on truth instead of deception. Marcus's family had chosen to protect him over me, but that was their loss. My daughter and I didn't need people in our lives who thought loyalty meant covering up betrayal. We deserved better, and we were going to get it. The pattern was clear now. Marcus was a serial cheater who'd been enabled by his family his entire life, but the pattern ended with me. I wasn't going to cover for him, make excuses for him, or pretend his behavior was acceptable. I was going to make sure he faced consequences for every lie he'd told and every heart he'd broken, starting with mine. The next morning, I sat in the office of Catherine Walsh, the divorce attorney my sister had recommended. The walls were lined with law books, and her desk was covered with neat stacks of papers. She looked like the kind of woman who didn't suffer fools gladly, which was exactly what I needed. Mrs. Browne, she said, reviewing the documents I brought, this is one of the most well-documented cases of marital deception I've seen in 20 years of practice. I'd given her everything, the bank statements, the fake business documents, the love letters, the lease agreement. Marcus's teenage diary and photos from the secret apartment. The evidence filled an entire folder. What are my options? I asked. Given the extent of the financial fraud and the systematic deception, you have several strong legal positions, she said. First, we can argue for spousal support based on his misuse of marital assets. Second, we can seek reimbursement for the money he spent on his affairs. Third, we can use this evidence to argue for primary custody of your daughter. She slid a set of papers across the desk. These are divorce papers. Once you sign them, there's no going back. Are you certain this is what you want? I looked at the papers, at the legal language that would formally end my marriage. 3 years ago, I'd signed a marriage certificate with hope and joy. Now I was signing divorce papers with determination and resolve. I'm certain, I said, picking up the pen. Before you sign, Catherine said, I need to tell you about the complexities of divorcing while pregnant. The court will want to establish paternity and custody arrangements, but they typically won't finalize anything until after the baby is born. What does that mean for me? It means you'll be in legal limbo for the next few months, she said. You'll be separated but not divorced, and Marcus will have certain rights as the presumed father of your child. The thought of Marcus having any rights regarding my daughter made me feel sick. Can I prevent him from being in the delivery room? Yes, absolutely. You have the right to decide who's present during the birth, but he'll likely have visitation rights once the baby is born, unless we can prove he's an unfit parent. I signed the papers, each signature feeling like a step toward freedom. What happens next? We serve him with the papers, and then we start the process of protecting your assets and preparing for custody negotiations, she said. But Mrs. Browne, I need to warn you, divorce proceedings can get ugly, especially when there's this much evidence of wrongdoing. Marcus and his family may try to discredit you or make you look unstable. Let them try, I said. I have the truth on my side. Catherine smiled for the first time since I'd walked into her office. That's exactly the attitude you need. But I want you to be prepared for what's coming. Marcus is going to realize that his comfortable double life is over, and he may not go quietly. I left the lawyer's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The divorce papers were filed, the legal process had begun, and I was finally taking control of my future. But Catherine's warning about Marcus not going quietly turned out to be prophetic. When I got home, I found him sitting on our front porch, looking haggard and desperate. He'd been crying, and his clothes looked like he'd slept in them. Luann, please, he said, standing up as I approached. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, I said, walking past him toward the door. You should be hearing from my lawyer soon. Your lawyer? He grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. You're divorcing me? Let go of me, I said, my voice steady despite the fear I felt. Yes, I'm divorcing you. Did you think I'd stay married to a man who's been lying to me for months? I can change, he said desperately. I can end things with Rachel, go to counseling, do whatever you need me to do. Please don't throw away our marriage. Our marriage was thrown away the moment you started lying to me, I said. You don't get to pretend you want to fix it now that you've been caught. He released my arm and stepped back, his expression shifting from desperation to anger. You're making a mistake, Luann. You're never going to find anyone else who'll put up with your issues. My issues? I repeated. What issues are those, Marcus? You're obsessed with having a baby, he said, his voice turning cruel. You've been so focused on getting pregnant that you stopped being a wife. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. So this is my fault, I asked. I'm to blame for your affairs because I grieved our miscarriages. I'm not saying it's your fault, he said, backtracking. I'm saying we both made mistakes. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. You made mistakes. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal from our savings account, to build a secret life with another woman. Those were your choices, not mine. What about Rachel? He asked. What about my son? That's between you and Rachel, I said. You'll have to figure out how to be a father to both of your children without destroying anyone else's life. I walked toward the door, but he called after me. You're going to regret this, Luann. You're going to realize that no one else will ever love you the way I do. I turned back to face him one last time. You're right about one thing, Marcus. No one else will ever love me the way you do, because the way you love is selfish, dishonest, and destructive. I deserve better than that, and so does our daughter. Inside the house, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. His words had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I'd almost believed that maybe I was partly to blame, that maybe I had been too focused on having a baby to be a good wife. But then I remembered the teenage diary, the evidence of his lifelong pattern of deception. This wasn't about me being a bad wife. This was about him being a bad husband, a bad person, someone who used love as a weapon to manipulate and control. I placed my hand on my belly and felt our daughter kick. I'm protecting you, I whispered. I'm making sure you grow up knowing that love should never hurt like this. The divorce papers were filed, the legal process had begun, and there was no going back. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of being trapped in Marcus's web of lies. But I had a feeling the hardest part was still ahead of me. Marcus's desperation escalated after he was served with divorce papers. What started as tearful phone calls and flowers delivered to my office soon became a campaign of manipulation that would have been impressive if it hadn't been so pathetic. Expensive jewelry arrived first, a diamond necklace that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. The accompanying note read, "For the woman who deserves the world. I'm sorry I forgot that for a while. Forever yours, Marcus." I returned it unopened. Next came the grand gestures. He showed up at my office with a bouquet of roses so large that 2 delivery men had to carry it. My coworkers were impressed until I explained that it was from my cheating husband who was trying to buy forgiveness. "That's not romantic," my colleague Sarah said, looking at the flowers with disgust. "That's manipulation." The gifts kept coming: expensive handbags, designer maternity clothes, a pair of diamond earrings that cost more than most people's cars. Each one came with a note full of promises and apologies, but I could see through them now. Marcus wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was sorry for getting caught. The worst part was that he was using our joint account to pay for his guilt gifts. Every diamond bracelet and luxury purchase was funded by money that was supposed to be for our daughter's future. It was like he was stealing from our child to try to manipulate me into staying with him. "He's getting desperate," Emma said, looking at the latest delivery of vintage pearl necklace that probably cost more than my car. "These gifts are getting more expensive because he knows they're not working," I said. "He's throwing money at the problem, hoping something will stick." But Marcus's desperation went beyond expensive gifts. He started showing up at places I frequented, always with a story about how he just happened to be in the neighborhood. The grocery store, the doctor's office, my prenatal yoga class, everywhere I went, Marcus seemed to appear. "This is called stalking," my lawyer said when I told her about his behavior. "Document everything, every gift, every unwanted encounter, every attempt to contact you." The documentation came in handy when Marcus's campaign took a darker turn. He started calling my family members, telling them his version of events and begging them to convince me to give him another chance. He called Mom crying, Emma told me, said you were being unreasonable and that he'd made one mistake but was willing to do anything to fix it. One mistake? I laughed bitterly. 8 months of systematic deception is one mistake. Mom knows better, Emma said. She told him not to call again. But Marcus was more successful with some of my relatives. My aunt called to lecture me about the importance of forgiveness and the sanctity of marriage. Everyone makes mistakes, Luann, she said. He's the father of your baby. Don't you think you should try to work things out? Would you stay married to a man who'd been stealing from your bank account to support his pregnant mistress? I asked. The line went quiet. I didn't know about the money, she said finally. Because Marcus isn't telling people the whole truth, I said. He's making it sound like a one-time affair instead of months of calculated deception. The manipulation extended to social media, where Marcus posted carefully crafted messages about making mistakes and learning from them. He never mentioned Rachel or the financial fraud, just vague references to difficult times and growing stronger together. Friends who didn't know the full story started reaching out to me with gentle suggestions about forgiveness and second chances. He seems really sorry, one friend said. Maybe couples counseling would help. It was exhausting, constantly having to defend my decision to leave a man who'd betrayed me so thoroughly. People wanted to believe in redemption stories, in the possibility that love could overcome any obstacle. But they didn't understand that Marcus wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry for losing control of the situation. The final straw came when Marcus showed up at my prenatal appointment. I was 24 weeks pregnant, and this was an important ultrasound to check on the baby's development. When I walked into the waiting room and saw him sitting there, my blood pressure spiked so high that the nurse was concerned. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm the father," he said, standing up with a hopeful smile. "I wanted to see how our daughter is doing." "You weren't invited," I said. "You have no right to be here." "I have every right," he said, his smile fading. "She's my baby too." The other pregnant women in the waiting room were staring at us, and I felt humiliated all over again. Even at my doctor's appointment, Marcus was making me the center of unwanted drama. Mrs. Browne. My doctor appeared in the doorway, taking in the tension immediately. "Is there a problem?" "My husband is here without permission," I said. "I don't want him in me appointment." Dr. Martinez looked at Marcus with a kind of professional coldness that made it clear he'd dealt with this situation before. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Only invited guests are allowed in appointments." "I'm not a guest," Marcus sighed, his voice rising. "I'm her husband." "You're her estranged husband," Dr. Martinez corrected, "and she's made it clear that you're not welcome. Please leave, or I'll have to call security." Marcus looked around the waiting room at all the faces staring at him, and I saw the moment he realized how his behavior appeared to others. He was the aggressive ex-husband disrupting his pregnant wife's medical appointment, hardly the image of a man who deserved forgiveness. "This isn't over, Luann," he said as he walked toward the door. "I'm not giving up on our family." "There is no family," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "There's just a man who destroyed his marriage and is trying to manipulate his way back into it." After he left, Dr. Martinez took my blood pressure again and frowned at the reading. "Mrs. Browne, I'm concerned about your stress levels. This kind of emotional turmoil isn't good for you or the baby." "I know," I said, tears of frustration streaming down my face. "I'm trying to protect both of us, but he won't leave me alone." "Have you considered a restraining order?" she asked. The thought had crossed my mind, but I'd been hesitant to take such a drastic step. I wasn't sure if his behavior qualified. "Showing up at your medical appointments uninvited definitely qualifies," she said. "This is harassment, and it's affecting your health." That afternoon, I called my lawyer and started the process of getting a restraining order. Marcus's campaign of manipulation had crossed the line from desperate to dangerous, and I needed legal protection. The expensive gifts, the stalking, the attempts to turn my family against me. It was all evidence of a man who believed he could control and manipulate his way out of any situation. But I wasn't the same woman who'd believed his lies. For months, I was stronger now, more determined to protect my daughter and myself from his toxic behavior. Marcus thought he could buy his way back into my life. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. I knew who he really was now. And no amount of diamonds could make me forget that. The restraining order was supposed to give me peace, but it only seemed to make Marcus more creative in his attempts to reach me. Since he couldn't contact me directly, he started using other women to deliver his messages, women I'd never heard of before, but who seemed to know intimate details about our marriage. The first call came from someone named Jessica. "Hi, Luann. This is Jessica Morrison. I'm a friend of Marcus's, and he asked me to call you." "I don't know you," I said, immediately suspicious. "And I have a restraining order against my husband. If he's using you to violate it, that's illegal." "Oh, no, nothing like that," Jessica said quickly. "I just wanted to tell you that Marcus is really struggling. He's been staying at my place since you kicked him out, and he's barely eating or sleeping, staying at her place." The words hit me like a physical blow. "How long has he been staying with you?" "About a week," she said. "He's so heartbroken about losing you and the baby. He talks about you constantly." I felt sick. Marcus had moved from our home directly into another woman's bed, and now he was using her to manipulate me. "Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you sleeping with my husband?" The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "How long have you been involved with him?" I asked. "We've been friends for a while," she said carefully. "But nothing romantic happened until after he left you?" "He didn't leave me," I said. "I threw him out for cheating on me with multiple women. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." "That's not what he told me," Jessica said, her voice uncertain now. "He said you grew apart after your miscarriages and that you asked him to leave." I laughed bitterly. "Did he also tell you about Rachel? About the baby she's carrying? About the secret apartment he was renting to meet her?" "What?" Jessica's voice was small and confused. "What baby?" "Marcus has gotten another woman pregnant," I said. "You're the third woman I know of, and I'm guessing there are more." The line went quiet for a long moment. "I think I've made a terrible mistake," Jessica said finally. "Yes, you have," I said. "But you're not the first woman to be fooled by Marcus's lies, and you won't be the last. My advice is to get away from him before you get hurt too." Jessica hung up without saying goodbye, and I felt a mixture of anger and pity. Marcus had found another victim, another woman to manipulate and deceive. But at least now she knew the truth. The calls kept coming over the next few days. Sarah, who'd been seeing Marcus for a few months and thought he was separated. Michelle, who'd met him at a bar and believed he was divorced. Tina, who'd been having an affair with him for over a year and had no idea about me. Rachel, or any of the others. Each conversation was like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Marcus wasn't just a serial cheater, he was a predator who targeted vulnerable women with carefully crafted lies. He told each of them exactly what they wanted to hear, created different versions of himself for different relationships, and managed to keep them all believing they were special. "This is unbelievable," Emma said when I told her about the calls. "How many women was he juggling?" "At least 5 that I know of," I said. "And those are just the ones brave enough to call me." The most disturbing call came from a woman named Amy, who'd been seeing Marcus for 2 years. "I thought I was going crazy," she said, her voice shaking. "He'd disappear for days at a time, always with different excuses. He said he was dealing with a difficult divorce, that his wife was mentally unstable and making false accusations about him." "He's been telling people I'm mentally unstable?" I asked. "He said you were obsessed with having a baby and that you'd threatened to hurt yourself." "If you left," Amy said, "he made it sound like he was staying with you out of pity." The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Marcus had turned my grief over our miscarriages into a weapon, using my pain to make himself look like a noble, suffering husband. painted me as the villain in his story, the unstable wife who was keeping him trapped in a loveless marriage. Amy, I need you to know that none of that is true, I said. I'm not mentally unstable, and I never threatened to hurt myself. I'm a woman who discovered her husband was living multiple lives and made the decision to protect herself and her unborn child. I believe you, Amy said. After talking to the other women, I can see the pattern. He tells everyone exactly what they want to hear. The group text message that showed up on my phone later that day was both horrifying and vindicating. Amy had created a group chat with all the women she could find who'd been involved with Marcus, and they were sharing their stories. Sarah. He told me his wife was infertile and that they'd decided to live as friends. Michelle, he said he was, divorced but still living in the same house for financial reasons. Tina, he's been telling me for a year that he was getting divorced so soon, but that his wife was fighting it. Jessica, he told me his wife kicked him out after a fight and that he was sleeping in his car. Rachel, he told me they were separated and just staying together until after the baby was born. Reading their messages, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, and I wasn't the problem. Marcus had been systematically deceiving multiple women, telling each of them elaborate lies to keep them invested in relationships that would never have a real future. But the fee. Relief was mixed with horror as I realized the full scope of his manipulation. He'd been juggling at least 6 different women, creating different personas for each relationship, and using my pregnancy as a prop in his various stories. Some women thought he was leaving me for them. Others thought he was staying with me out of obligation, and all of them thought they were special enough to be worth his lies. We should meet in person, Amy suggested in the group chat. I think we all need to hear each other's stories. The idea terrified me, but I also felt drawn to it. These women had been lied to by the same man, manipulated by the same techniques, hurt by the same selfish behavior. Maybe together we could make sense of what he'd done to all of us. I'm in, I typed back. But I need to know, is anyone still in contact with him? I blocked him after our phone call, Jessica replied. Same here, said Sarah. I'm changing my number, Michelle added. I threw him out of my apartment, Amy said. Told him to never contact me again. Only Rachel and I were still dealing with the consequences of his behavior. We were both pregnant with his children, both facing the reality of being tied to him for the rest of our lives through custody arrangements. What about you? I asked Rachel privately. Are you still in contact with him? He's been calling constantly, she replied, saying he's ready to commit to me now that you're divorcing him. But after talking to all these other women, I don't believe anything he says anymore. The web of lies was finally unraveling, and Marcus was losing control of all his different stories. The women he'd been manipulating were talking to each other, sharing information, and refusing to be isolated in their pain. For the first time since Rachel had walked into my backyard, I felt like I had allies in this fight. Women who understood what Marcus was capable of, who'd seen through his charm and manipulation, who were ready to make sure he faced consequences for his actions. The meeting was set for the following Saturday. 7 women who'd been betrayed by the same man, coming together to share their stories and plan their next steps. Marcus thought he was clever, thought he could manipulate and control unlimited numbers of women without consequence. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated our ability to find each other and fight back. At 26 weeks pregnant, I was entering the phase where every doctor's appointment felt crucial. My daughter was growing steadily, and Dr. Martinez was pleased with my progress despite the stress of the divorce proceedings. But as I sat in her office reviewing my prenatal care plan, I realized I needed to make some important decisions about Marcus's role in the birth and beyond. Have you thought about who you want in the delivery room? Dr. Martinez asked, updating my chart. My Sister Emma, definitely, I said. But I need to make sure Marcus can't get access to the hospital when I'm in labor. We can put a note in your file specifying who's allowed to visit, she said. Hospital security takes those requests very seriously. I looked at my medical records, thick with documentation of a healthy pregnancy that had been achieved despite incredible emotional turmoil. Doctor, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. Could the stress of my husband's deception have affected my previous pregnancies? Dr. Martinez set down her pen and looked at me carefully. What kind of stress are we talking about? I found out he's been cheating on me for most of our marriage, I said. During my previous pregnancies, I was dealing with his lies, his emotional distance, his constant phone calls, and mysterious absences. I just wondered if that level of stress could have contributed to my miscarriages. Chronic stress can definitely impact pregnancy, she said gently. It affects hormone levels, blood pressure, and overall health. I can't say definitively that it caused your losses, but it certainly didn't help. The possibility that Marcus's betrayal had contributed to the loss of our previous babies was almost too painful to consider. But it also made me more determined to protect this pregnancy, to create a peaceful environment for my daughter's development. I want to make sure he has no access to information about this pregnancy, I said. No updates on appointments, no notification when I go into labor, nothing. That's absolutely your right, Dr. Martinez said. Your medical information is private and you control who has access to it. I updated my emergency contacts, removing Marcus entirely and adding Emma as my primary contact. It felt like another step toward independence, another way of protecting my daughter from her father's chaos. The conversation with my lawyer later that week focused on the same theme, establishing boundaries and protecting my rights as a single mother. We need to discuss custody arrangements, Catherine said. Marcus will likely petition for visitation rights once the baby is born. What if I don't want him to have any contact with her? I asked. Unless we can prove he's an unfit parent, the court will typically grant some form of visitation, she said. But we can argue for supervised visits initially, given his pattern of deception and manipulation. The idea of Marcus having any access to my daughter made me feel sick. He's lied to me for months, stolen her money, and manipulated multiple women. Doesn't that make him unfit? It makes him a terrible husband, Catherine said. But the court will focus on whether he poses a danger to the child specifically. I thought about the restraining order, about his stalking behavior, about the way he'd manipulated every woman in his life. What about the fact that he's been harassing me during pregnancy? Doesn't that show poor judgment? It helps our case, she said, especially the incident at your doctor's appointment. We can argue that his behavior shows a pattern of putting his own desires above your health and the baby's well-being. We spent the next hour discussing custody strategies, financial arrangements, and ways to protect my daughter from Marcus's manipulation. By the time I left the office, I had a clear plan for the legal challenges ahead, but the emotional challenges were harder to navigate. That evening, I sat in the nursery I'd been preparing alone, looking at the crib Emma and I had assembled, the mobile my mother had bought, the rocking chair where I planned to nurse my daughter. Everything in this room represented hope and love, but I couldn't shake the sadness that none of it would be shared with her father. I'd imagined Marcus being there for the late-night feedings, the first smiles, the moment our daughter said her first word. Instead, he'd be a weekend visitor, a stranger who'd have to earn the right to be part of her life. The baby kicked, and I placed my hand on my belly. I'm sorry your daddy isn't who I thought he was, I whispered. But I promise you'll never doubt that you're loved, that you're wanted, that you're the most important thing in my world. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. How did the appointment go? Good, I replied. Baby's healthy, and I've made sure Marcus can't access any medical information. Smart, she texted back. Have you thought about what you want to name her? I had been thinking about it, but every name I'd considered had been discussed with Marcus during happier times. I needed a name that was mine alone, that didn't carry memories of our failed marriage. I was thinking about Rose. I texted back. Rose Catherine, after my grandmother and my lawyer. Perfect, Emma replied. Strong women's names for a strong little girl. Rose Catherine Browne. It felt right. Felt like a name for a daughter who would grow up knowing her own worth, who would never accept being lied to or manipulated, who would demand honesty and respect from everyone in her life. I opened my laptop and started a document titled Letters to Rose. I wanted to record this journey, to have something to share with my daughter when she was old enough to understand what had happened during the months before her birth. My dearest Rose, I wrote, I'm writing this when you're 26 weeks old, still growing inside me, still safe from the complications of the world outside. Your father and I are getting divorced, and I want you to understand that this decision isn't about you. It's about protecting both of us from someone who doesn't know how to love honestly. I wrote about the gender reveal party, about discovering Marcus's lies, about the strength I'd found in other women who'd been betrayed by the same man. I wrote about my hopes for Rose's future, about the kind of woman I wanted her to become. I want you to know that love should never hurt, I wrote. It should never require you to question your own reality, to accept lies as truth, or to make yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's selfishness. You deserve a love that celebrates you, that chooses you consistently, that builds you up instead of tearing you down. The letter was therapeutic, a way of processing my emotions while creating something meaningful for my daughter. I plan to keep writing throughout the remainder of my pregnancy, documenting the journey from betrayal to healing, from victim to survivor. As I prepared for bed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. My daughter was healthy. My legal protections were in place, and I was building a life based on truth instead of lies. Marcus had tried to destroy me, but instead he'd forced me to become stronger, more independent, more focused on what truly mattered. Rose kicked again, and I smiled. We're going to be okay, baby girl, I whispered. We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be free. The final confrontation with Marcus came not at my choosing, but when I least expected it. I was 30 weeks pregnant, leaving my lawyer's office after discussing custody arrangements, when I found him waiting by my car in the parking garage. Need to talk, he said, stepping out of the shadows between parked cars. His appearance shocked me. He looked like he'd aged years in the past few weeks. His clothes wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. You're violating the restraining order, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm calling the police. Please, he said, holding up his hands. Just give me 5 minutes. I need to tell you something important. There's nothing you could say that I need to hear, I said, but something in his expression made me pause. He looked broken in a way I'd never seen before, like a man who'd finally run out of lies. I know about the other women, he said. I know you've been talking to them. All of them? I asked. Or just the ones you remember? He flinched. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. Yes, you do, I said. Now move away from my car so I can leave. Rachel lost the baby, he said suddenly, and the words hit me like a physical blow. What? I whispered. 2 days ago. She was 22 weeks, and she lost him. His voice broke. She called me from the hospital, and I went to see her. She looked at me and said it was probably for the best, that no child deserved to have me as a father. I felt a complicated mix of emotions: grief for Rachel's loss, relief that she wouldn't be tied to Marcus through a child, and horror at the pain she must be experiencing. I'm sorry for her loss, I said carefully. But that doesn't change anything between us, doesn't it? He asked. Don't you see what I've done? I've destroyed everything I've ever cared about. I've hurt you, hurt Rachel, hurt all those other women. And for what? For the thrill of lying? For the ego boost of thinking I was so clever, he pulled out his phone and showed me a recording app. I want to confess everything, on the record. I want you to have proof of every lie I told, every woman I manipulated, every dollar I stole from our account. I stared at the phone, hardly believing what I was hearing. Why would you do that? Because I can't live with myself anymore, he said. Because I wake up every morning knowing I'm a monster who destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Because our daughter deserves to know the truth about her father. He pressed record and began to speak. My name is Marcus James Browne, and I want to confess to systematically deceiving my wife, Luann Browne, for the entirety of our marriage. What followed was the most complete confession I could have imagined. Marcus detailed his affairs, starting with women he'd been seeing during our engagement. He admitted to the fake business trips, the secret apartment, the money he'd stolen from our joint accounts. He named names, gave dates, provided details about lies I hadn't even discovered yet. I told Jessica that Luann was mentally unstable, he said into the phone. I told Amy that Luann was abusive. I told Sarah that Luann was infertile by choice. I told Michelle that Luann and I had never really been in love. Every single thing I told these women about my wife was a lie designed to make them sympathize with me. The confession went on for 20 minutes, covering every aspect of his deception, the gambling debts I hadn't known about, the credit cards he'd opened in my name, the way he'd manipulated each woman by telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. I never loved any of them, he said finally. I used them for sex, for ego, for the thrill of getting away with lies. The only person I ever really loved was Luann, and I destroyed her trust completely. When he stopped recording, we stood in silence for a long moment. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I finally understand what I've lost, he said. Because I want you to have everything you need to protect our daughter from me. Because I want you to be able to prove to her someday that leaving me was the right decision. I looked at this man I'd once loved, this stranger who'd shared my bed in my dreams while living a completely different life. Do you really understand what you've done to me? No, he said honestly. I don't think I can understand that level of pain. But I know I caused it, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness. You're right, I said. You don't deserve forgiveness. You destroyed our marriage, betrayed my trust, and put my health and our baby's health at risk with your lies and manipulation. He nodded, accepting my words without argument. I know, but Marcus, I continued, this confession doesn't change anything. You're still the same man who lied to me for years. You're still the same man who stole from our family. You're still the same man who made me feel like I was crazy for questioning behavior that was absolutely worth questioning. I know, he said again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just trying to give you the tools you need to move forward without me. I saved the recording to my phone and backed it up to my cloud storage. This confession would be invaluable in custody proceedings, proof of Marcus's character and his unfitness as a parent. I have one more thing to give you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. These are the keys to the apartment, the passwords to all my accounts, and a complete list of every woman I've been involved with. I want you to have everything. I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. What happens now? Now I disappear, he said. I'll pay child support. I'll follow whatever custody arrangement the court decides. But I won't fight you on anything. I won't try to manipulate you or hurt you anymore. And the other women? I've contacted all of them to apologize and to make sure they know the truth about what I did, he said. Most of them hung up on me, which is what I deserved. I looked at him one last time, trying to reconcile this broken man with the charming husband I thought I'd married. I hope you get help, Marcus. I hope you figure out how to be a decent person. But I hope you do it far away from me and my daughter. He nodded and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the parking garage. I stood by my car for a long time, processing what had just happened. The man who destroyed my life had just handed me every tool. I needed to rebuild it. The confession was more than I'd ever hoped for complete validation of everything I'd suspected, legal proof of his deception, and ammunition for the custody battle ahead. But more than that, it was closure. Marcus had finally told the truth. And the truth was that he'd been lying about everything from the very beginning. Drove home with a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The man I'd married had never really existed. He'd been a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide the reality of someone who was incapable of honesty or faithfulness. But now I knew the truth, and the truth had set me free. Rose kicked strongly as I pulled into my driveway, and I placed my hand on my belly. "That was your daddy," I whispered. "And now you know exactly why we're better off without him." 2 weeks after Marcus's confession, I received a call that would change everything I thought I knew about Rachel's story. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "Luann, I need to see you," she said between sobs. "There is something I have to tell you about the baby." We met at the same cafe where we'd had our first honest conversation months ago. Rachel looked fragile, her face pale and drawn from grief. But there was something else in her expression, a mixture of relief and fear that I couldn't quite interpret. "I lead to Marcus," she said without preamble. "About losing the baby. I didn't lose him, I gave birth to him. He's alive and he's in the NICU at St. Mary's Hospital." I felt like the world had shifted beneath my feet. "What? Rachel, what are you talking about?" "I went into premature labor at 22 weeks, she said. "The doctor said it was touch and go, but he survived. He's tiny, only 2 pounds, but he's fighting." "Why did you tell Marcus the baby died?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "Because I got the paternity test results," she said, pulling a folded paper from her purse. "Marcus isn't the father, Luann. My ex-boyfriend from before I met Marcus, he's the father." I stared at the paternity test results, hardly believing what I was reading. "You were pregnant with someone else's baby the whole time?" "I thought it was Marcus's," she said. The timing seemed right, and when I told him I was pregnant, he never questioned it. But I had a brief reconciliation with my ex about a month before I met Marcus. I didn't even think about it until after I gave birth and the baby looked nothing like Marcus. The implications hit me like a wave. Marcus destroyed our marriage for a baby that wasn't even his. "I'm so sorry," Rachel said. "I should have gotten the test done earlier, but I was so convinced it was Marcus's baby. When I realized the truth, I panicked. I thought if I told him the baby died, it would be easier for everyone." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. Marcus had thrown away our marriage, lied to me for months, and manipulated multiple women off for a child that wasn't even his. "Does your ex know about the baby?" I asked. "I called him when I got the test results," Rachel said. "He's flying in from Seattle tomorrow. We broke up because he wasn't ready to be a father, but when I told him about the baby, he said he wants to be involved." "And what about Marcus? Are you going to tell him the truth?" Rachel's face crumpled. "I don't know. Part of me wants him to suffer, to let him live with the guilt of what he did. But part of me thinks he deserves to know that the baby he claimed to love isn't even his." I thought about Marcus's confession, about the broken man who'd handed me the evidence of his own destruction. "He needs to know," I said, "not for his sake, but for yours. You need to be free of him completely. Will you come with me?" Rachel asked. "When I tell him?" "I don't think I can face him alone." The idea of seeing Marcus again made my stomach turn, but I understood Rachel's fear. "Okay," I said. "But I want my lawyer present. Whatever we're going to tell him, it needs to be official." We arranged to meet at Catherine's office the next day. Marcus arrived looking hopeful, probably thinking that Rachel and I had finally come to our senses and were ready to forgive him. His face fell when he saw the lawyer, the official setting, the grim expressions on our faces. "What's this about?" he asked, settling into a chair across from us. "Rachel has something to tell you," I said. "Something that changes everything." Rachel took a deep breath and looked directly at Marcus. "I lied to you about losing the baby. He's alive and he's in the NICU at St. Mary's Hospital." Marcus's face went white. "What? Why would you lie about that?" "Because I found out he's not." "Your son?" Rachel said, sliding the paternity test results across the table. "My ex-boyfriend is the father." "You destroyed your marriage for a baby that was never yours." Marcus stared at the papers, his hands shaking as he read the results. "This can't be right." The timing was wrong," Rachel said. "I was already pregnant when I met you, but I didn't realize it. I thought you were the father because I wanted you to be the father." "So everything," Marcus started, then stopped, the full weight of the revelation hitting him. "I destroyed my marriage for nothing." "You destroyed your marriage because you're a liar and a cheater," I said. "The baby was just your excuse. You would have found another reason to betray me." Catherine had been taking notes throughout the conversation. "Mr. Browne, this information significantly impacts the custody arrangements we've been discussing. Since you're not the father of Rachel's child, there's no legal connection between you." "But what about Luann's baby?" Marcus asked desperately. "That's still my daughter, right?" "Yes," I said. "Unfortunately for her, you're still her biological father. But this confession Rachel just made, combined with your recorded confession, gives me everything I need to argue for sole custody." Marcus buried his face in his hands. "I've lost everything for nothing. I've destroyed the only good thing in my life for a child that isn't even mine." "You didn't lose everything for nothing," I said. "You lost everything because you're incapable of being honest. You lost everything because you think you can manipulate and control people without consequences. The baby was just the excuse you used to justify behavior you were already engaging in." Rachel reached across the table and touched my hand. "Luann, I want you to know that I'm done with him completely. I'm changing my name, moving back to Seattle to be near my ex and the baby, and I never want to see Marcus again." "Good," I said. "You deserve better than this." Marcus looked up at both of us, his face a mask of devastation. "What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices," I said. "You'll pay child support for my daughter. You'll have supervised visitation if the court allows it, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that you destroyed a good woman's trust for absolutely nothing." Catherine handed Marcus a set of papers. "These are the updated custody terms. Given this new information, Mrs. Browne is seeking sole physical and legal custody with potential for supervised visitation to be determined by the court." Marcus didn't even look at the papers. "I won't fight it," he said quietly. "I don't deserve to be a father." "No," I agreed. "You don't." As we left the office, Rachel hugged me goodbye. "I'm sorry for everything," she said. "I know that doesn't fix what happened, but I needed you to know." "I'm sorry too," I said. "For both of us, but we're both going to be okay. Are we?" She asked that. I looked down at my belly, at the place where my daughter was growing strong and healthy despite everything that had happened. "Yes," I said. "We're going to be better than okay." The revelation that Marcus had destroyed our marriage for a baby that wasn't even his felt like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve for months. It proved what I'd suspected all along, that Marcus was capable of lying about anything, manipulating anyone, and destroying everything good in his life for the sake of his own ego. But it also felt like justice. Marcus had gotten nothing from his betrayal except loneliness, regret, and the knowledge that he'd thrown away a loving marriage for a fantasy. The baby he'd claimed to love, the future he'd planned with Rachel, the elaborate lies he'd told, It had all been based on a fundamental deception. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. The truth was finally complete, and the truth was that Marcus had gotten exactly what he deserved: nothing. The financial forensic accountant's report arrived just as I was entering my final trimester, and it revealed the full scope of Marcus's deception in black and white numbers that took my breath away. Catherine had hired Eleanor Vance, a specialist in tracking hidden assets and financial fraud, to examine every aspect of our finances. "Mrs. Browne," Eleanor said as we sat in Catherine's office, "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen such systematic financial deception from someone who wasn't running a Ponzi scheme." The report was thick, filled with charts, graphs, and detailed explanations of how Marcus had been siphoning money from our joint accounts, hiding assets, and creating false financial records. The numbers were staggering. "He's stolen approximately $47,000 from your joint accounts over the past 2 years," Eleanor said, "but that's just the money we can track. There are numerous cash withdrawals, cryptocurrency purchases, and transfers to accounts we haven't identified yet." "Cryptocurrency?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of the fraud. "He's been converting cash to Bitcoin and other digital currencies," Eleanor explained. "It's a common way to hide assets during divorce proceedings. We found wallets containing approximately $23,000 in various cryptocurrencies. But the financial fraud went beyond simple theft. Marcus had been living a completely separate financial life, one that included credit cards I'd never known about, investment accounts in his name only, and business ventures that existed only on paper. He's been claiming business expenses for a consulting company that doesn't exist," Eleanor continued. "The IRS is going to be very interested in this information." The fake business had been Marcus's way of justifying his expensive lifestyle with Rachel and the other women. Every dinner, every hotel room, every gift had been written off as a business expense for a company that existed only in his imagination. "What about the secret apartment?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Eleanor said, flipping to another section of the report. The apartment was just the beginning. He's been renting multiple properties under different names, using fake business licenses and forged documents. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been running a sophisticated financial fraud scheme, complete with false identities, fake businesses, and hidden assets. "He's been using your social security number to open accounts," Eleanor said. "You're going to need to freeze your credit and file identity theft reports with all 3 credit bureaus." The identity theft was the most personal violation of all. Marcus had been using my identity to fund his affairs, putting my credit at risk while he lived his double life. Every time he'd opened a new account or taken out a loan, he'd been stealing not just money, but my financial future. "Can we recover the money?" I asked. "Some of it," Catherine said. "The court can order him to reimburse you for the stolen funds, and we can seize his hidden assets. But the cryptocurrency is more complicated. If he's moved it to overseas exchanges, it might be gone forever." Eleanor pulled out another document. "There's something else. Marcus has been claiming you as a dependent on his tax returns, while also claiming to be single on loan applications. He's been living in 2 different financial realities." The tax fraud was a federal crime, and Eleanor had already contacted the IRS about Marcus's false claims. "They're opening an investigation," she said. "Financial fraud of this magnitude typically results in criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" I asked, hardly believing what I was hearing. "Identity theft, tax fraud, and financial fraud," Catherine explained. "Marcus hasn't just been a bad husband, he's been a criminal." The report also revealed that Marcus had been using our home as collateral for loans I'd never known about. He'd taken out a second mortgage without my knowledge, forged my signature on loan documents, and put our house at risk of foreclosure. "Need to save my home," I said. feeling panicked. I can't lose the house where I'm going to raise my daughter. We can challenge the fraudulent loans, Catherine said. Since your signature was forged, the loans aren't legally valid. But it's going to take time and legal action to clear this up. Eleanor handed me a thick folder. This is everything we found so far. Bank records, loan documents, evidence of the fake businesses, and proof of the identity theft. Your lawyer will need all of this for the divorce proceedings. As I looked through the documents, I felt a mixture of rage and vindication. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus had been systematically stealing from me for years, using my identity to fund his affairs and putting my financial future at risk. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. We found evidence that Marcus has been planning to leave the country. He's been researching non-extradition countries and has been converting assets to untraceable forms. He's planning to run? I asked. It appears so, Eleanor said. The cryptocurrency purchases, the fake businesses, the hidden assets, it all points to someone preparing to disappear. The thought that Marcus might try to flee the country to avoid his responsibilities to our daughter filled me with rage. He had already destroyed our marriage and stolen our money. Now he was planning to abandon his child completely. We need to flag his passport, Catherine said. If he's planning to run, we need to stop him before he disappears with whatever assets he has left. As we left the meeting, I felt overwhelmed by the scope of Marcus's crimes. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal who'd been systematically defrauding me for years. The man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, had been stealing from me while I slept beside him, but I also felt empowered. The forensic accountant's report was proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't paranoid, wasn't imagining things. Marcus had been living a completely separate financial life, and now there was documentation of every crime he'd committed. The money he'd stolen had been meant for our daughter's future, her college fund, her first car, her wedding someday. Instead, Marcus had spent it on hotel rooms and jewelry for his mistresses, on maintaining multiple apartments and fake businesses. But now I had the evidence to fight back. The report would be crucial in divorce proceedings, in custody hearings, and in criminal court. Marcus thought he was clever, thought he could steal from me and disappear without consequences. He was about to learn how wrong he was. As I drove home, I placed my hand on my belly and spoke to my daughter. Daddy tried to steal your future, I said, but Mommy is going to make sure he pays for every penny he took from us. The forensic accountant's report wasn't just evidence of Marcus's crimes. It was a roadmap to justice. At 34 weeks pregnant, I found myself in a place I never expected to be, standing in my perfectly prepared nursery, surrounded by love and support, but without the man I'd once imagined sharing this moment with. The room was painted, a soft lavender with white furniture that Emma and I had carefully assembled together. The walls were decorated with quotes about strength and love, and the bookshelf was already filled with children's books I'd been collecting for years. It's perfect, my mother said, running her hand along the crib rail. Rose is going to love this room. I'd finally chosen paint colors without consulting anyone, picked out decorations that reflected my taste alone, and created a space that felt peaceful and hopeful. The nursery represented everything I wanted for my daughter's security, love, and the freedom to be herself without lies or manipulation. Look at this, Emma said, holding up a small paint sample card. This is the color you originally wanted for the nursery before Marcus convinced you to go with that awful beige. I remembered that conversation, how Marcus had dismissed my preference for lavender as too feminine and pushed for a neutral color scheme. At the time, I thought he was being practical, but now I realized it was just another way he controlled and diminished my choices. I love the lavender, I said, looking around the room with satisfaction. It's exactly what I wanted. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation, both legal and emotional. The forensic accountant's report had led to criminal charges against Marcus, who was now facing federal prosecution for identity theft and tax fraud. The news had been both vindicating and overwhelming. I'd married a man who turned out to be a criminal. I'd also been building a new life, one based on my own choices and values. I'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping victims of emotional abuse, and I was slowly learning to trust my own judgment again. How are you feeling about the birth? My therapist, Dr. Sarah, had asked during our last session. Excited, but also nervous, I'd admitted. I keep thinking about how different this is from what I imagined. Tell me about what you imagined, she said. I thought Marcus would be there, holding my hand, crying when he saw her for the first time. I thought we'd be this perfect little family, welcoming our miracle baby together. And now? Now I realize that what I was imagining was a fantasy. I said, Marcus was never going to be that devoted father and husband. He was always going to be someone who put his own desires above his family's needs. The realization had been painful but liberating. I'd been grieving not just the loss of my marriage, but the loss of a future that had never really existed. Marcus had never been the man I'd thought he was, so the life I'd imagined with him had been built on lies. I'm actually excited about doing this on my own, I told Dr. Sarah. I know exactly who's going to be in the delivery room, who's going to support me, who's going to put Rose's needs first. There's no uncertainty, no wondering if Marcus will be present emotionally or distracted by his phone. Emma had volunteered to be my birth partner, and we'd taken classes together on breathing, techniques, and pain management. My mother would be at the hospital, along with my father and several close friends who'd supported me through the divorce. You're going to have the birth experience you deserve, Emma had said, surrounded by people who love you and Rose unconditionally. The custody arrangements were still being negotiated, but thanks to the forensic accountant's report and Marcus's criminal charges, the court was taking my concerns about his fitness as a parent seriously. My lawyer was confident that I'd be granted sole custody with the possibility of supervised visitation once Rose was older. The judge was very concerned about the financial fraud, Catherine had told me. A man who steals from his pregnant wife and uses her identity to commit crimes isn't someone the court trusts with unsupervised access to a child. Marcus had been arrested the previous week when he tried to board a flight to Costa Rica with a suitcase full of cash and fake identification documents. His plan to flee the country had been thwarted by the passport flag we'd placed, and he was now in federal custody awaiting trial. Good, I'd said when Catherine called with the news. I hope he stays there until Rose is old enough to understand what kind of man her father really is. As I stood in the nursery, I felt a deep sense of peace about the future. Rose would grow up in a home filled with honesty and love, surrounded by family members who would never lie to her or manipulate her emotions. She would learn to trust her own judgment, to demand respect from the people in her life, and to never accept being treated as less than she deserved. I have something for you, my mother said, pulling a small wrapped box from her purse. It's from your grandmother. Inside the box was a delicate silver locket, engraved with roses and containing a tiny photo of my grandmother holding me as a baby. She wanted you to have this when you became a mother, my mother explained. She said it would remind you that strong women raise strong daughters. I fastened the locket around my neck, feeling the weight of generations of strong women who'd survived difficult times and emerged stronger. My grandmother had raised my mother during the Depression. My mother had raised me as a single parent after my father's death. And now I was preparing to raise Rose with the same strength and determination. Rose is going to be surrounded by incredible women, Emma said, looking around the room at the photos I'd hung of my grandmother, my mother, and other female role models. She's going to know exactly what kind of woman she can become. That evening, I sat in the rocking chair and wrote another letter to Rose. adding to the collection I'd been building throughout my pregnancy. My dearest Rose, I wrote, in 2 weeks, you'll be here and I'll finally get to hold you in my arms. I want you to know that every decision I've made these past few months has been about creating the best possible life for you. I left your father not because I stopped loving him, but because I loved you too much to let you grow up in a home built on lies. I wrote about the nursery, about the family members who were excited to meet her, about the values I hope to instill in her. I wrote about the importance of honesty, of self-respect, of choosing people who would celebrate her instead of trying to control her. I want you to know that you are enough, exactly as you are, I wrote. You don't need to change yourself to earn love. You don't need to accept lies to keep peace. And you don't need to make yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. As I finished the letter, I felt Rose kick strongly, as if she was responding to my words. I love you, baby girl, I whispered, and I can't wait to meet you. The nursery was ready, my support system was in place, and I was more prepared for motherhood than I'd ever imagined possible. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood what kind of mother I wanted to be: honest, strong, and completely devoted to my daughter's well-being. Marcus had tried to destroy our family, but instead he'd forced me to create something better, a home based on truth, a future built on love, and a legacy of strength that would guide Rose throughout her life. In 2 weeks, everything would change, and I was ready. The contractions started at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 37 weeks into my pregnancy. I'd been dreaming about holding my daughter when the pain woke me up, sharp and insistent, announcing that Rose was ready to meet the world. Lay in bed for a moment, my hand on my belly, feeling the tightness that meant everything was about to change. There was no Marcus to wake up beside me, no husband to share the excitement and fear of this moment. Instead, there was just me, alone in the darkness, about to become a mother, but I wasn't afraid. I felt calm, prepared, ready for whatever came. Next, I called Emma first, then my mother, then Dr. Martinez answering service. Within an hour, my birth team was assembled and we were headed to the hospital. Emma drove while my mother sat in the back seat, timing my contractions and reassuring me that everything was going perfectly. You're doing great, sweetheart, Mom said as another contraction gripped me. Just breathe through it. The hospital had been alerted about my situation, no father present. Restraining order in place, specific instructions about who was allowed in my room. The staff treated me with gentle professionalism, understanding that this birth was happening under unusual circumstances. Mrs. Browne, my nurse, Janet, said as she helped me into a hospital gown, "We have your birth plan here, and we're going to follow it exactly. Emma is your primary support person. Your mother is approved to be in the room, and no one else will be allowed access without your explicit permission." The labor progressed steadily throughout the morning. Emma never left my side, coaching me through contractions, helping me change positions, and advocating for my needs with the medical staff. My mother held my hand during the most intense moments, whispering encouragement and reminding me how strong I was. "You're doing this," Emma said as I worked through a particularly difficult contraction. "You're bringing Rose into the world exactly the way it should be, surrounded by people who love both of you unconditionally." By early afternoon, I was in active labor, and the intensity was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But with each contraction, I felt myself growing stronger, more focused, more determined to meet my daughter. There was no room in my mind for thoughts of Marcus, no space for regret or sadness about his absence. This moment belonged to Rose. And me. I can see her head, Dr. Martinez announced, her voice filled with excitement. "She's almost here, Luann. Just a few more pushes." The final moments of labor were a blur of intense sensation and overwhelming emotion. I felt Emma's hand in mine, heard my mother's voice encouraging me, and focused everything I had on bringing my daughter safely into the world. "She's here," Dr. Martinez exclaimed, and suddenly there was a cry, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Rose Catherine Browne entered the world at 2:17 p.m., weighing 6 pounds, 3 ounces, and measuring 19 inches long. She was perfect 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair, and eyes that seemed to look directly into my soul. "Oh my God," I whispered as they placed her on my chest. "She's so beautiful." Rose stopped crying the moment she felt my skin against hers, and I knew that this was the moment I'd been waiting for my entire life. Not the perfect family I'd imagined with Marcus, but this just me and my daughter, connected by love and strength, and the promise of a future built on truth. "She knows her mama," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Look at how she's looking at you." My mother was crying too, overwhelmed by the sight of her granddaughter. "She's perfect, Luann, absolutely perfect." Dr. Martinez finished delivering the placenta and began the process of cleaning up, but I barely noticed. I was completely absorbed in studying Rose's face, memorizing every detail, marveling at the miracle of her existence. "She has your nose," Emma observed, "and your grandmother's chin. And her own perfect little personality," I added, watching, as Rose's eyes focused on my face with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so new to the world that the next few hours passed in a haze of wonder and exhaustion. Rose latched onto nursing immediately, as if she'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Emma took dozens of photos, capturing every yawn, every tiny movement, every expression that crossed my daughter's face. "Have you thought about what you want to say to her?" my mother asked as I held Rose against my chest, both of us resting between feeding sessions. "I want to tell her about all the people who love her," I said, looking around the room at the faces of my chosen family. "I want her to know that she was born into a circle of love that will never fail her." That evening, as visitors came and went, I found myself alone with Rose for the first time. She was sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely trusting, completely secure. I looked down at her perfect face and felt a surge of emotion so powerful, it took my breath away. "Hello, my beautiful girl," I whispered. "I'm your mama, and I've been waiting for you for so long." I told her about the journey that had brought us to this moment, about the heartbreak that had led to strength, about the lies that had revealed truth, about the betrayal that had taught me what real love looked like. "Your daddy isn't here," I said softly, "but that's okay. You're going to be surrounded by people who choose to love you every single day, who will never lie to you, who will always put your needs first." Rose stirred in my arms, and I felt her tiny hand grasp my finger with surprising strength. In that moment, I knew that everything I'd been through had been worth it. The pain, the betrayal, the months of uncertainty, all of it had led to this perfect moment. "I promise you," I whispered, "that I will raise you to be strong, to be honest, to never accept being treated as less than you deserve. I will teach you that love should never hurt, that trust should never be broken, and that you are worthy of every good thing in this world." As the night settled around us, I held my daughter close and felt more complete than I'd ever felt in my life. This wasn't the birth experience I'd imagined, but it was perfect in its own way. Rose had been born into a family that chose love over lies, truth over manipulation, strength over weakness. The first photo I took of just the two of us would become one of my most treasured possessions. In it, Rose is sleeping peacefully against my chest, and I'm looking down at her with an expression of pure love and fierce protectiveness. It was the beginning of our story together, not the story I'd planned, but the story we deserved. Marcus had tried to destroy our family, but instead, he'd given me something more precious than he'd ever realize. He'd given me the strength to build a life based on truth, the courage to demand better for myself and my daughter, and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the greatest gift is learning what you're willing to fight for. As I drifted off to sleep with Rose in my arms, I felt nothing but gratitude. For my daughter, for the family who'd supported me, for the strength I discovered within myself, and for the future that stretched ahead of us, bright, honest, and filled with love. 6 months after Rose's birth, I sit in her nursery writing the final letter in the collection I started during my pregnancy. She's napping in her crib, her tiny fists curled around a soft pink blanket, completely peaceful in the afternoon sunlight. Streaming through the window, the woman who discovered her husband's betrayal at a gender reveal party feels like a stranger now. I'm stronger, more confident, more certain of my own worth than I've ever been. Rose has transformed me in ways I never expected, not just into a mother, but into the woman I was always meant to be. Marcus is serving 18 months in federal prison for identity theft and tax fraud. The criminal charges were ultimately more severe than our divorce proceedings, and he lost everything: his job, his freedom, and any chance of being part of Rose's early life. He writes letters sometimes, pathetic attempts at apology that go straight into the trash unopened. He's requested supervised visitation rights when he gets out, Catherine told me during our last meeting. But given his criminal record and the restraining order, the court is likely to deny his request until Rose is much older. Good, I said. She doesn't need his chaos in her life. The financial recovery was more successful than I dared hope. The forensic accountant's work helped us recover most of the stolen money, and the court ordered Marcus to pay substantial child support and restitution. The house is secure, Rose's college fund is growing, and I've started my own marketing consulting business that gives me the flexibility to work from home. Rachel moved to Seattle and married her ex-boyfriend, the father of her son. She sends occasional updates about their life, and I'm genuinely happy for her. We both survived Marcus's manipulation and found our way to better futures. I named my son Henry, she wrote in her last email, after my grandfather, who always told me I deserve better than men who lie. I should have listened to him sooner. The other women from Marcus's web of lies have all moved on as well. Amy started a blog about recognizing manipulation in relationships. Jessica went back to school and became a therapist. Sarah met a man who treats her with the respect she deserves. We stay in touch occasionally, bonded by our shared experience of surviving Marcus's deception. You saved us all, Amy said during our last phone call. When you brought us together, you showed us that we weren't crazy, that we weren't imagining things. You gave us the strength to demand better. We saved each other, I corrected. Marcus thought he could isolate us, keep us from comparing stories. But when women support each other, we become unstoppable. Dr. Sarah, my therapist, helped me understand that Marcus's behavior was never about me. You didn't cause his infidelity, you couldn't have prevented it, and you certainly can't cure it, she said. He's a man who uses love as a weapon, who sees relationships as games to be won rather than connections to be cherished. The therapy helped me process not just the betrayal, but the grief of losing the future I'd imagined. You're not mourning the loss of Marcus, she explained. You're mourning the loss of the man you thought he was. That insight was liberating. I wasn't grieving a real person, I was grieving an illusion, a carefully constructed fiction that had never really existed. The Marcus I'd married was a character he'd created to manipulate me, and when that character was no longer useful, he'd discarded it without a second thought. Rose stirs in her crib, and I reach down to stroke her soft cheek. At 6 months old, she's already showing signs of the strong personality I hope will protect her throughout her life. She's curious, determined, and completely unafraid to express her needs. She sleeps through the night, smiles at everyone she meets, and has the most infectious laugh I've ever heard. She's going to be formidable, Emma said last week, watching Rose determinedly work to reach a toy that was just out of her grasp. She's got your strength and your grandmother's stubbornness. Good, I said. She need both. I've started dating again, cautiously and with clear boundaries. There's a man named David who owns a bookstore downtown, who makes me laugh and never checks his phone when we're together. He knows about Marcus, about the divorce, about my determination to protect Rose from toxic people. I admire your strength, he said after I told him the whole story. You turned a nightmare into a new beginning. I had help, I said. From my family, from other women who'd been hurt by the same man, from strangers who became friends. I learned that healing isn't something you do alone. David has met Rose, and she seems to like him. He's patient with her, gentle in his approach, and never tries to rush our relationship. I'm happy to go at whatever pace works for both of you, he said. Rose comes first, always. That attitude tells me everything I need to know about his character. A good man understands that loving a single mother means loving her child, that respecting boundaries is a sign of strength, not weakness. The letters I've written to Rose fill an entire box now, documenting the journey from betrayal to healing, from victim to survivor. Someday, when she's old enough to understand, I'll share them with her. Not to burden her with my pain, but to show her what's possible when you refuse to accept being treated as less than you deserve. In the final letter, I write, my dearest, Rose, you are 6 months old today, and you've already taught me more about love than I learned in 32 years of life. You've shown me that love should be simple, honest, and unconditional. You've taught me that trust is earned through consistency, that security comes from knowing someone will always put your needs first. I write about the family she's inherited, not just biological relatives, but the chosen family of people who've supported us through this journey. Emma, who dropped everything to help me when my world fell apart. My parents, who opened their home and hearts to both of us. The women who'd been betrayed by Marcus and chose to support each other instead of competing for his attention. You're going to grow up knowing that women can be each other's greatest allies, I write. You're going to learn that strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. You're going to understand that love is not a finite resource. The more you give, the more you have. As I finish the letter, Rose wakes up and smiles at me, her whole face lighting up with joy. I pick her up and hold her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent, marveling at the miracle of her existence. We did it, baby girl, I whisper. We survived, we healed, and we built something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. Marcus tried to destroy our family, but he failed. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift of all, the motivation to become the woman I was always meant to be. Strong, independent, honest, and completely devoted to protecting the people I love. The future stretches ahead of us, bright with possibility. Rose will grow up knowing that she's loved, valued, and protected. She learned to trust her instincts, to demand respect, to never accept lies as truth. She understands that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to love you consistently, honestly, and without condition. If you've ever felt your perfect life crumble in an instant, if you've ever discovered that the person you trusted most was living a lie, if you've ever had to choose between accepting betrayal and fighting for something better, I want you to know that you're stronger than you realize. You deserve a love that builds you up instead of tearing you down. You deserve honesty, respect, and the freedom to be yourself without fear of judgment or manipulation. And if you have children, they deserve to see you fighting for that better life. They deserve to grow up in a home where love is honest, where trust is earned, and where their needs come first. The pink balloon from our ruined gender reveal party is long gone, but what it represented, hope, joy, and the promise of new lives. On and Rose. She is my miracle, my motivation, and my proof that sometimes the most beautiful things can grow from the most painful experiences. Marcus thought he was destroying me, but he was actually setting me free. Free to love honestly, to trust wisely, and to build a life based on truth instead of lies. Free to raise my daughter in a home where she'll never doubt her worth, never question her reality, and never accept being treated as anything less than the precious gift she is. We are not broken. We are not victims. We are survivors who chose love over lies, truth over manipulation, and strength over weakness. And that choice has made all the difference.